We actually have Ankit Jain, the Senior Director of Product at Browser Stack. His journey includes transformative roles as VP of Product at Hopin, Head of Product for Atlassian Marketplace, VP of Products at Practo.
If something is applied in B2C in freemium and you may see a certain conversion rate, certain funnel, it's not necessary that it will directly apply on B2B also.
What advice would you give to early PM?
My philosophy across B2C, B2B, both, at the end of the day, the problem has to resonate emotionally with you. And when I say emotionally, it also means I would want to find a human element to the problem. And mind you, this was a free Q&A platform to begin with.
Oh.
Right. So the patients are not paying for it, doctors are not charging for it.
As someone who's done the 0 to 1 journey, can you share an example of a challenge that you faced while building a 0 to 1 journey, and actually how did you overcome?
This was a more real-time interaction, so you could chat through a chat interface, or you could do a phone call, do a video call. When we started introducing those new form factors, new kind of challenges come, and we solved through them as well, because it was not just about opening up a monetization lever. Change in format meant that there were new set of problems. So multiple times in my different product, fake gate experiments is my go-to strategy.
What is the one thing that you think that the person should prepare for? Welcome to Behind the Feature. Today, we're thrilled to have a true veteran of the product management world. We actually have Ankit Jain, the Senior Director of Product at Browser Stack, which is a pioneer in software testing across the globe, not only in India. With over a decade of experience across different industries, Ankit has actually transformed the way we look at products in India, as well as globally. His journey includes transformative roles as VP of Product at Hopin, Head of Product for Atlassian Marketplace, VP of Products at Practo, India's leading health tech startup. He's also been private equity investment team for half a decade. Today, we're excited. We're actually going to be talking to Ankit about how to build products from 0 to 1. But once we've done that, how do you actually scale them? Moving on, how is it that the B2B and the B2C world actually differs? Then for early PMs, this is going to be a masterclass and some really cool hacks that Ankit's going to share with you today. Welcome to the show, Ankit. It's great having you here.
Thanks, Diksha. Thanks for inviting me to the show.
For someone who's worked across so many different products, what are some of the challenges that you faced, in your product management career?
Sure. I'll take the question in a slightly different manner. Typically, you will hear about product challenges of 0 to 1, scale, etc. But I'll talk about things which really surprised me. Um, you hear about some of the typical problems through different sources. There are books on it. But when you actually go into the field and start executing, there are things that can completely take you by surprise. And I'll just mention a few of them. Probably now they are more colloquial knowledge, but to me, they were all very, very surprising things. Firstly, I learned over a period of time that product actually is not the most winning mode for your business.
Okay.
Even though I am a product manager, product leader, but I can say this that looking at all the industry examples and how long a product really survives in the field amongst the competition, product doesn't end up being the most important mode in the long run. You have to embellish it along with other things which support it to really have a staying power, which creates a, let's say, a decade long, 2 decade long, 3 decade long story, right? A Microsoft Excel doesn't stay for 35 years or 40 years just by being the best product, but it has a lot many more things going around it. So I think that was one very strong learning, which you don't have it when you start in this career. Another very typical learning is distribution wins. You may have the best product, but if you don't have the distribution muscle, your product will not see the light of the day. Many users will not see it. So distribution wins. Third is a good problem to have, but a very interesting one. If your product is too successful, then folks who are using this may not want you to change anything in that product. Okay. They've got too used to it. They have got too used to the way it operates, and it is part of their workflow. It is the part of their mental model. And you change something, it breaks their mental model, and they wouldn't want you to change it, right? So that's another interesting thing that you learn, that sometimes you're too good for yourself. And maybe one more thing around that is it's better to have people have an eye on your product and maybe misuse it also sometimes, maybe abuse it also sometimes, because that means there are a lot many folks out there who have found creative ways to use your product in a new way. You may not want them to use the product in that way, and hence put abuse prevention and many other ways to stop that. but it'll always give you an aha moment or pause that, hey, somebody could use the product for this purpose. I never thought of it in this way. And that's very interesting. People find creative ways to get something else out of the product that you had built that you had not initially thought of.
Ankit, this is actually very interesting. So first, I'm going to actually summarize. So you said product alone is not a defensible mode. The second one that you did mention was that distribution at the end of the day is important, and this has actually been shared both by Twisha, who's from Book My Show, and there was Moin also when he said product market fit. Very often, product managers forget
Yes.
that this piece that hey, I've built it, and you don't think about the distribution aspect. And finally, you said the product abuse is it's not a bad thing. I mean, I actually remember when the Dream 11 VP of products, he had come. He was my first guest, and he said people were doing it on Telegram.
Right.
Like forming groups and all, and that's where they actually got inspired and they got it. So this is definitely interesting. The one piece that I think is a bit controversial, and you're saying which is a bit different, is your users, if they're used to a certain way in which your product works, and then if you try to change it, they are not happy. We just did an episode with the Shaik, who's the head of design at Myntra, and he spoke about Zomato and the velocity with which that they kind of change. So why do you think B2C apps in particular can get away with something like that? Sure. My conjecture would be that in B2C, in most of the circumstances, and we are here referring to, let's say, an e-commerce oriented, a transactional app where your relationship with the app is to achieve a transaction or a service delivery which has a short period of time of engagement with the product, right? There, if the need is very high and the time involved of engagement is low, people would still want to find a way to move forward. And the change is not that drastic that it is part of your, but in B2B, where you are very entrenched into the product, using the product for 8 hours a day, let's say, and your workflows are set, your shortcut keys are set, you know mentally which, in what part of the screen, what functionality lies. Probably you're doing it almost as if you're driving a car and thinking something else, right? You're doing it in your subconscious memory, and now suddenly the dashboard changes or that workflow changes. It suddenly breaks your flow, and you can actually see that impact on productivity. And people trying to shift from that to something else new is a jarring impact, right? And one of the ways we have seen this operate is you provide, let's say, a new experience, but you provide the users also an option to fall back to the previous one if they don't like it. I know. Okay. Oh, so that's why ICICI Bank still gives me an option to use my previous right. Yeah. Face. So, Ankit, we have stepped into the B2B and the B2C world. So, can you explain some of, in your experience, the similarities between the two? Sure. I think at the end of the day, they're all products. And as a product manager, the overall success that you want and the style that you go and things that you want to do, that wouldn't change drastically. The key principles remain the same, which means that it doesn't go away that you have to understand the user very well, understand the pain points, be very clear about what value proposition you're providing. It doesn't go away that you have to do a product market fit discovery first and then scale. It doesn't go away that you have to find good distribution angles. Doesn't go away that you have to fight against the competition. So all of those remain the same. So the way for a product manager, a B2B product may differ in actual tactics on the ground versus B2C. Well, let's take some example. Think of, let's say, Jira. My experience at Atlassian, right? Yeah. Now, if we say that Jira is a workflow management tool or a project management tool, the difference between a B2C and B2B is that the key value that you're providing via Jira, which is managing work. Work is a very abstract concept. And for any B2B product, when you're actually tackling any work related process that you're trying to manage via software, it starts becoming a very abstract thing. Let's take Swiggy. Yeah. You want to order food. Even the various components of, there is a restaurant, there is a food, somebody coming it, delivering it to you. Yeah. He or she has to come via a particular route. All of these are very tangible things. You can relate to them very well, correct, right? And you can then think about how to represent them in your product. But an intangible thing like work, imagine how do you even on a blank slate start thinking about it, right? And you have to then create a product which basically takes your subconscious mental model about work. You can see it on a screen, and not only that, it's not just for you. You're collaborating with your teammates. So collective mental model has to be represented by this software.
So getting this correct, articulating this, is a very different problem, I believe, than where you have tangible artifacts in front of you, right?
Right.
The other ways it could differ is uh, B2B has a lot of collaboration angle, right? So should have a good space where different team members can come together to complete work. That's how real world also operates. You're not there are point solutions, but all great large B2B products would have many people coming in collaborating together, right?
At the same time.
At the same time, or even if they're doing it asynchronously, they're basically passing units of work between each other, right?
Okay.
So again, how do you think about it? And you get them to collaborate seamlessly, right? That's another thing that you think about, which typically may not happen in a single person transactional product in B2C, right? Uh,
Like Google Docs.
like Google Docs, yes, yes. In B2B, the relationship journey typically is much longer, much continuous than again a B2C product, and especially for those products which are transactional in nature. Again, I'm referring more to e-commerce or episodic needs, right? That episode may last for maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5 seconds if you're making payments. If you're doing a delivery, it may last for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
right? But in B2B, the payment the sale has already happened, the purchase of the product has already happened. Now you're engaged on this continuously, day on day, week on week, month on month, right? So that's so key between then the organization building the product and the person who is using it is about the availability of the software, making sure that nothing breaks so that their work is not disrupted.
Right.
And more importantly, if something goes wrong, you have a support available to address that. Uh, while all these elements also exist for B2C, they will end with one single transaction and they will reappear when the next transaction comes, right? So you have to plan for it, but this is a continuous nature of engagement. So I think there are these ways in which it differs.
Do you also think the mindset is the same in both the cases for a PM, or is it different?
As I said, the principles will remain the same.
Yeah.
So the anchoring of what you're doing doesn't change. But mindset, yes, you have, when you think about B2B, I would say you also have to think about slightly longer term horizon. You are not going to see the outcomes of any of the effort that you're doing immediately,
Okay.
right? If let's say you change a feature in B2C,
Yeah.
and if you have decent scale, you may get a feedback in one day. And over a week, definitely, if there is a scale, you will get a decent amount of feedback to know whether it is working, your metrics are up or not. In B2B, that feedback may not be immediately available because the way your end user is interacting with the product, it could be that it takes a month for you to get that feedback.
So in browser stack, for example, how does that?
So in BrowserStack, the interesting thing is we have the core product with which BrowserStack started its journey. That has a very regular use case. When you come in, you make an environment for yourself for a device on the cloud, and then you do your testing inside it, and then you exit a session, which means that in some manner you're using it for an episodic need, but you're using the software regularly because on a day-to-day basis you are doing the testing.
Correct.
Right? So what matters for the user is when you're coming to the product, the kind of test environment that you need, that is available always to you. So there's always an availability of that, right? It's maybe an equivalent of saying that you have a cab always available when you want it, right? But the difference would be that when you are doing the testing, then the environment should be as stable, as responsive as your desktop to get you the outcome.
Is there a specific use case that you had to adapt? It worked in B2C for you, but when you tried applying it to B2B, it actually did not necessarily.
In B2C, you have apps like Duolingo or let's say Coursera or even Spotify, let's say,
Yeah.
right? They may have a free tier that you join on. It gives you certain ways to engage with the product, get the value out of it. And typically, then the upgrade happens when you hit a certain limit. But it's an impulsive need to then go and make an upgrade. But take gaming also as an example.
Exactly.
Right? Typically, in transactional products, you don't have the freemium strategy. Let's say you wouldn't probably have it in e-commerce, right? So you wouldn't have a freemium product, but it exists in those products where you are using a software, not a service delivery being managed through a software. Right?
More of a subscription.
More of a subscription product, correct. So now if I come to B2B, uh, in that the trial helps you, of course, test out the product.
Right.
But the purchase decision will not be impulsive unless it's a prosumer use case. the purchase decision will be more complex, longer, because there is maybe a different buyer altogether in the organization. You as an end user may have used the product, may have liked the product, but you may not have the agency to go and purchase it. Right. So the purchase decision is still more complex there. You'll have to convince your buyer, stakeholder that this is the right product. It could be that you are testing it on the behalf of your entire team, right? So there may be more feedback source than just from a single person. So these are the ways it is different. So if something is applied in B2C in freemium, and you may see a certain conversion rate, certain funnel, it's not necessary that it will directly apply on B2B also. Right. The context may be very different. So that's let's say one example where it will not work. Yeah, the other example where B2B may differ with B2C, I think I've stated this earlier, that the sale in B2B typically is just a starting point of the relationship, and then the product usage is for a very, very long time. Yeah. And then you continuously keep seeing more upgrades in the product, you get more value out of it. There's a renewal cycle which happens. In between, you may need support from the organization. A transaction-based B2C product, that episode of purchase and usage of the product is a single time. And till the time you don't have the next use, you will not come back to the product, right? Unless there are other engagement loops. But the sale and the value extraction happens almost simultaneously or in a short period of time. But in B2B, you will expect that this to be a continuous engagement throughout the year. A lot of us and a lot of people out there, we tend to be more attracted to B2C world. It's always more glamorous, even in the product Sure. level. But I mean, I've also, I had the LinkedIn PMM lead, and she said the B2B world is, I mean, it's just going to grow. And there is obviously a lack of supply, can I say that, of product managers. What advice would you give to early PMs Sure. Who want to join the B2B space? See, I'll probably address this question slightly differently. Uh, it's about what you feel excited about to work on, Yeah. and you feel could be a great thing for your personal success, career, if you engage with that, right? Um, if I unpack this, it has two aspects. Either you're looking for an external validation about what you're doing, and the sources for that could be you're seeing a lot of hype about that, you're seeing a lot of chatter about that particular topic. There's great funding cycle happening. You see a lot in the news. Yeah. So there's an aura around it, and quick commerce these days. Quick commerce, or maybe cryptocurrency a while back, right? Yeah. And you get gravitated towards it. Uh, the other is about internal validation, whether you feel a particular problem is an important problem to solve, Okay. right? And would you want to invest your energy in making this happen? I want to unpack the internal validation a bit more. Now, in B2B, typically it will be a situation, unless you are very fortunate, that the end user for whom you're building the product, um, you would probably not understand that persona very well, Exactly. right? You may not understand that function, that role, what this person does on a day to day, what are the nuances, right? So it's hard. So it could become a very mechanical thing of extracting some features and building them and saying that, yes, this is working for this person, right? But where is the fun in that, right? So my philosophy across B2C, B2B, both, has been that at the end of the day, the problem has to resonate emotionally with you. And when I say emotionally, it also means I would want to find a human element to the problem. Problem statements would be exciting on both sides. Okay. It's about whether you have been able to build a connect with them. With this. And second piece would be that some of the nuances of style of operating. Do you have a particular preference to it, or you may have got coached into a particular style, Yeah. and you want to change it at this moment? I now want to jump into actually building products, right? Sure. You're someone who's done the 0 to 1 journey. Can you share an example of a challenge that you faced while building a 0 to 1 journey, and actually how did you overcome? So one of the problems that I tackled was launching online doctor consultation in India. Who was the leader? They started it. Yeah. And a lot of people then went on to. Yes, yes. So we started this in 2015 in India. That was that time. Okay. As I said, it had never been tried before in India. To start off with this, we had to first test out the waters on how do we get a new set of patients to interact with a set of doctors, Okay. and just even observe what kind of conversation happens, right? You're basically putting two people in a room who are supposed to speak with each other, but now you have a wall in between them, They were used to speaking with each other without that wall, but now that wall is there. How do they interact with each other? So we initially got, because Practo has a good network of doctors from the other businesses that we were running, we were able to get some doctors to align and say, let's try it out and see how this proceeds. And we were able to get the patients who were trying to reach out for physical consultations to say, hey, look, there's a new offering. And would you want to speak with a doctor, right? But speaking with a doctor in of itself is such a new kind of an experience that we said, let's make the minimum viable interaction. I wouldn't say minimum viable, it was the minimum interaction that you can do to see how the conversation goes. And we started basically with a Q&A format first. Okay. Which was more of an asynchronous. You post it on our website, and it gets, instead of so think of a Quora like model, but instead of it going to other patients to help you out, it's not a crowdsourced kind of a response. It actually goes to a doctor, and a doctor responds back to you, and then you may get a certain kind of a response and then take action beyond that, right? When we started with this, we started initially seeing how the interactions are going, which kind of ailments are getting a decent closure, which kind of ailments are not possible to close via this, and the real data started showing those opportunities. We also started learning, because this was completely unfiltered, putting up problem statements onto a platform. We soon started realizing that the patients themselves don't have the medical knowledge to express it in the right terms. So now these nuances of a doctor-patient relationship start emerging. In a face-to-face conversation, in a synchronous conversation, doctor asks questions and extracts the information out of the patient. Yeah. But here the patient has to volunteer everything upfront, and the doctor has to read it and then make a diagnosis, right? But the patient may not be telling everything, or they may not be using the right terms. So we had to figure out, with whatever information is available, what kind of ailment probably they are talking about. Because here, so we started then asking patients to put the ailment which is part of this, then we started asking patients to put in the specialty that they want to refer to. Okay. Then we soon hit the next block, which is that patients don't know the medical names of the specialty. Obviously. Right? And some of the people were able to move forward, but many of the folks wouldn't. Okay. So then we had to move to the next level, where we say that here's a pictorial representation of human body, and choose which part of the body that problem is, wow, and then put it right. And then as we got more data, the next set of evolution was to figure out, if you've already posted a query and we can do a pattern matching with our previous set of queries, then we can auto detect which kind of doctor it should go to, right? So once we start progressing, let's say on this side, on the triaging for the consumer or for the patient, what kind of problem they have, then we were able to funnel it to the right set of doctors. We also started getting to know what is the kind of demand for each kind of different specializations, the different kind of ailments, how much capacity do we need on the other side, bring those doctors in, build our queuing algorithms, etc. So that on the doctor side, the interesting stories are there, right? There was a question asked to us, and we were also figuring out, why would a doctor respond to a query like this, right? And mind you, this was a free Q&A platform to begin with. Oh. Right? So doctors are not, the patients are not paying for it, doctors are not charging for it. We learned that doctors enjoy this kind of interaction because it gives them the same satisfaction perhaps you and I would get solving a Sudoku in the morning, right? And the insight there was that a doctor of any specialization, when they're in the clinic, would see 80% of the problems of roughly the same kind in the day or in a week. Okay. 20% maybe of a different kind. So right, you are ultimately, while for me it may be a unique problem, for a doctor they have seen thousands of times. Correct. Right? It's nothing new for them. So this kind of started acting as a mental stimulation for a lot of doctors. We built more layers on it. It became that you had fun, right? The next layer came was of fame. So started rating the doctors and yes, yeah, so doctor rating was happening, but more important than that, when we had enough volume on the platform, we could now match a patient with a doctor from the same locality. When we had started, the supply was not enough, yeah, for us to make this happen. So a patient from Hyderabad could get a response from a doctor from Delhi. The medical advice is correct, but if there's any follow-up required, that is not possible between an Hyderabad patient and a Delhi doctor. But when we were able to do this in a more hyper-local way, doctors started realizing that patients anyway search for health queries online, and they're posting here. And if this person is from roughly the same locality or the same region, there's a chance that the patient will have a footfall inside the clinic. They'll come and meet them as well, right? And we started seeing anecdotes of that. This started happening. So the element of fame also got built. And then lastly would be monetization, which I'll call fun, fame, and fortune. When we were able to set this up to a extent that we were comfortable that we're able to solve the right problem, then we introduced the monetization layer on it. And in fact, change the format, also introduce a new format apart from the Q&A which was happening. This was a more real-time interaction. So you could chat through a chat interface, or you could do a phone call, do a video call. When we started introducing those new form factors, new kind of challenges come. And we solved through them as well, because it was not just about opening up a monetization lever. The change in format meant that there were new set of problems to solve. These different ways, we made sure that the interaction, which is traditionally been face to face, you can quickly take the interaction in a particular direction. The doctor knows how to address the sentiment of the person. You have the body language and the face in front of you, but here none of this is there. So through these mechanisms, then we tried to break down the interaction into those components and make sure that the core elements of them are served via the platform.
So you mentioned cheap experiments. How can PMs actually run cheap experiments?
So this is a very interesting question. I think I have done this multiple times in the products that I have led. I'll take a example of Atlassian.
Okay.
In Atlassian, when initially you were trying to install apps, only the admin of the Jira app could install an app. So if you're a normal user of Jira, you cannot install an app on top of it. But that means that a lot of people who are looking at an app and are interested, they don't have the democratization to install an app. We wanted to open this up for everyone to install, but it had its own challenges, uh, that if all end users have access to this, there's a question of security, privacy, who should get access, etc. So we took an approach to say, why not let users request an app from their administrator, right? You are seeing a great app, you want your admin to say, vet it out that this is the right app for our organization, and then go ahead and adopt it, right? But this process could be very long. It's a not a simple and easy process. So we wanted to introduce mechanism inside that Atlassian marketplace to make this happen. But this would be a big investment. Plus, we didn't know how admins would react to it, because if they start getting so many user requests about adopting an app. So what we first did, wanted to check whether there's a user appetite for such a thing. Okay. Right? So we introduced a fake gate experiment of a button inside the app listing where you say request an app.
Okay. So it was actually not something you built.
So that was a button we actually built. It was just a button,
but no functionality.
but no functionality behind it. And then it would get to a pop-up which would ask, hey, in what scenarios do you actually request an app from your administrator? What are the key challenges you face when you post a request like this? How do you do this? Do you just walk down the aisle and make this happen, or there's a formal process, right? Do you an email? So you want to learn what is actually the process behind the scenes.
Oh wow.
So that then you can incorporate whatever is the best feasible, the least friction, and make it happen. But given the volume that we had on marketplace, this was easy to do. Even if, let's say, it would take us 15 days to get an answer, it would be a diverse set of answer rather than speaking only with one or two end users and making an hypothesis. So multiple times in my different products, such fake gate experiments is my go-to strategy.
It's fake
to learn. It's typically just a button,
okay.
and behind that could be a message that please share more about how you use this product in this scenario.
Like a survey or something.
A survey, a feedback box. What would you want to see? Why are you pained? Why did you click this? I also have to caution that you have to do this in a smart manner.
Okay.
You don't want to also antagonize your users by putting too many of these and they're feeling that there's no functionality behind the product. So you also have to select your cohort on which you do this experiment.
Okay.
They should be a long-time users, etc., etc. You don't want to introduce it to a completely new set of users who may then form a different impression about the product. So there are some guardrails that you have to build around it. But otherwise, it's the cheapest experiment that you can do.
And we've spoken about 0 to 1. You're someone who's actually worked on actually scaling products.
Sure.
Can you share how is it your mindset has to be different? I was chatting with a friend, and there is this context switching that you have to do, right?
Sure.
0 to 1 requires a very different way in which you think versus some when you're scaling it. So how does that work? And
Right.
do you have hacks?
I think mindset shift definitely would be about system thinking You want to break down your product into different product modules. You want to understand the architecture behind the scene. Typically, I would say as a PM, you don't need to peek too much behind the scenes on the engineering architecture of your product. If you know, that's great, but it's not required as a mandatory step in your journey. But for when you're building for scale,
Yeah.
You can't avoid that, right?
So you should understand
You
that.
should understand that because it has then long-lasting implications on the product choices that you're making, right?
Okay.
If you're building for scale, let's say performance and stability and reliability of your product, which could in some other circumstances be more of an engineering metric, and you may not be directly involved on it as much, can easily become your top product OKRs for a particular period of time, because that's what is going to push the envelope for the product, right? It's a very different mindset then, because as a product owner now you are responsible for this.
Yeah.
And it's not just a behind the scenes engineering problem. So your involvement on how the scaffolding of the product works, how this product actually runs behind the scene, and making sure that all of those processes are taken care of or of the top notch quality, is a mindset shift that you would have to start with.
And is there a way, or how do I do it?
I think a good way to start would be to look at your own product.
Okay.
Think about independent modules within your product that you can break it into. Try to put it into a block diagram, right, of how different components are and how they're interacting with each other. Perhaps also take help of your engineering counterparts to understand a bit that this is the right representation of what you are thinking versus how the system is built. Maybe there's a gap there,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it's operating in a different manner. And try to understand also a bit about each of those module. What are the capabilities within it? What are the scaling challenges that have happened in the past? What is the limitation that this will have if you try to introduce a new service or a new component? That should give you a good feel for how this product works, and then you take it forward as the new challenges or new problems come in.
So, Ankit, as an early PM, right, I'm a part of your team.
Sure.
How is it that you think I can contribute this 0 to 1 journey? Because I have limited experience, right?
Right, right. Look, when you're an early PM in your career, you're joining a team. Of course, you don't hold the entire strategy decision. So the key would be what incremental steps you can take to contribute to the team. I think the biggest contribution that you can do just coming on the team is making sure that the learning velocity is kept high, which means your delivery, execution, experimentation is super fast. If you have to index yourself on one thing, think about how you can make this just faster, working along with your counterparts.
Okay.
The next step from there would be to think about, once you've executed those learning opportunities, experiments, be very honest about the assessment of the outcomes. Because if you don't take the right learnings, then you don't do the right next steps. People sometimes miss instrumentation in their products, or sometimes they don't even look at the right metrics when the experiment has been done, or the right user insights. So being on top of that as the next step is very important. Once this journey is completed, basically you are helping move the needle forward. Then it's a question of asking in which direction the needle should be going. Then you are stepping into the zone of problem framing, that has a particular user problem or the assumption that we are making, they have been stress tested. So you are now ahead of the curve of the actual experiment. You are thinking, what are the next 5 experiments I can plan for? And you are making those learning opportunities available for yourself to then plan for the next. So to summarize, it will be, you aid in execution, you aid in learning, and then you proceed to start aiding in the problem framing itself, right? And this journey itself will allow you a lot of context about the product, about the industry, and hence you can, in let's say 6 months or a year time, be able to contribute much better.
And now that we've gone into the early PM journey, if I'm just starting my career as, I'm just done my engineering and I want to evaluate, what are the top 3 things I should evaluate in my first PM job?
Got it. Just like being on a team, the learning should be very fast. Individually for yourself also, you should index for where can you get the fastest learning.
Okay.
And from the best sources, which means that you should index for, do I have access to seasoned PM leadership from where I can learn about the nuances of product management, course correction required whenever it is sought, but you also have decent level of autonomy to make your own decisions, right? Of course, I'm asking for a unicorn situation.
Yeah.
But at least when you're trying to find that opportunity, if you evaluate that, you'll get a sense of where does it lie on that spectrum and make that call. The other thing that I will look for is whatever you understand about the macro of that business. right? Because if the macro of the business is on an upward trend and you have a strong feel for it, then the opportunities will come very fast in the organization to iterate and learn, right? So that's the other thing that you'd be looking
What do
for.
you think is the current flavor of this season? If
I think fintech has been, from an India context, fintech has been
Yeah.
making a lot of strides,
Okay.
and will continue making a lot of innovations there. But I also say, let's take the trend of AI, much hyped, but because this is a new field, there'll be a lot of underlying infra, tooling, and the next set of capabilities required to be built to make this happen. So all of these, because they are so nascent areas, there is no established template or protocol to how to do this. Many people will be attempting it, making their own judgment calls, and trying to make it happen. And that's a great place to be in to try out new ideas.
So according to you, it's basically a startup either in the AI space or the fintech space.
It could be. And when I say AI, I also mean folks who are building the pipeline for the AI use case, not necessarily the end use case, but also the pipeline of the infra. Because
An example?
let's say I'll take the example of Scale.ai, right? It
Okay.
has multiple products, but one of the key things it allows people to do is um, tag the tag the training data which is coming in so that you can train the models. I'm simplifying it a lot. It's much more complex,
Yeah.
but this is the core value that it provides, right? Those kind of examples where if you're part of it will also give you a very horizontal view of different use cases, but also making sure that you understand the behind the scene nuances of how to make this work at the best scale and the best quality possible.
What is one of the most overrated product metric right now?
Any product metric can be overrated if it is taken out of context. I think typical examples would be DAU or MAU. They tend to be vanity metric in most situations. Yes, they may solve a certain signaling function, but they end up being a very high level KPI, which doesn't tell you much about how the business is operating.
One thing that a B2C PM should learn from a B2B PM.
For a B2C PM versus B2B PM, I think one very key aspect of difference is your understanding of positioning of the product. In B2C, because the use case in general tend to be narrower and easier to explain, it's very well understood once you look at the product what it does. Like order a food, get a cab, right? But in B2B, the description of the problem that you're solving tends to be much more complex, and hence, how do you position the product and the end user is able to understand the value that you're providing very crisply is going to be very important, and that perhaps is very different. So B2B PMs spend a lot of time thinking about its positioning, and it may help in B2C situation also where you have different flavors of the same service and you want to communicate that well.
And who do you think is harder to build for, India or the globe?
Well, I've been on both sides,
Yes.
right? And built for India, built from India for Globe as well. I think building for Globe is, in some sense, harder because you're in India and then you're trying to unpack the end customer. But it's easier because, in many ways, the geographies tend to be homogeneous for many situations.
Yeah.
And once you apply a key learning, it can easily translate. India is a very diverse country. Within the same country, while we are saying that this is for India,
Yeah.
you have a lot many more diverse problems, and hence understanding the user mindset from a, I mean, I'm not saying anything new. Tier one city, tier two city, tier three city will be very different, right? And then there are cultural, regional differences that you have to aim for. So I think building for India is harder when you start reaching a certain scale because then you have to incorporate lot many more varieties of nuances than perhaps you would have to do in a global product which is addressing a global B2B market.
And one inspiring book that every PM should read.
The book itself is inspired. It's a very popular book by Marty
Marty
Kagan.
Kagan.
Yeah. The reason I'm mentioning it is if you're an early part of your PM career, it gives you a very good structure to think about the overall product management problem and the North Star of it. So, look, let's be real. When you enter a new job, you may have read a lot of good material on product management, but it will not all translate on the job on the first day. Marty's book kind of gives you a picture of 11-star experience for product management. And then your job is to say that this is the North Star, this is the 11-star experience. My current job allows me to do a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, calibrate for yourself. And then keep aiming how do you move to the next level of iteration from there, right?
And this is going to be a question. How big is your team at Browser Stack? Okay.
So the current team I'm leading is around 12 PMs in total. BrowserStack has over 50 PMs. So my team is 12 PMs.
And if I'm interviewing for a role at Browser Stack as an early PM, what is the one thing that you think that the person should prepare?
BrowserStack, and I would say this is true for every company, but we would index a lot for speed of execution. Okay. While retaining your focus on the key problem that is being solved and having a good validation of why you have picked up this problem.
How do you test me for that?
So, given let's say your past experiences, right, we would want to debug on if you chose to work on a problem and whatever may have been your scope, right? How did you actually understand the full context of it? What did you do to gain that context? What were the actions that you took? What were the pitfalls or the wrong directions, wrong turns that you took in that? How did you course correct? Right. And when it came to translating that into execution, what were your steps around that? And when you learned something new, how did you go back and turn it around faster? Right. And again, making this all happen in a short period of time with actual outcomes that you have produced gives a very strong signal that you are adaptable to these situations and are able to get to the final outcome, even if you have taken some assumptions in between which may have not worked. So you don't have to give up on those assumptions. You update them and you keep revisiting them. Okay,
This has been super insightful. I mean, I can assure you, our PAMs and techies, whenever they're starting their career, these are the nuggets that you're always looking for, and they're not accessible. So thank you so much.
Thanks
For coming on to the show. It's been a lot of insights, and I can't wait to have you back on.
Thanks, Diksha. Hope this is helpful for your audience.
Thank you.